Hey guys, so I wanted to have a little chat about running alternative fuels, whether it be black diesel, veg oil, whether you're heating it, whether you're adding diesel fuel and gas to it, whatever. There is a downside. I shouldn't say a downside. Downside's the wrong word. There is a cost for doing it. Now, yes, you save a bunch of money doing this. Yeah, there's a little bit of legwork involved, don't get me wrong. But after you kind of get set up, it's not so bad. And spending some money for cleaning equipment and all that stuff, any money you're spending for cleaning equipment, well worth the money. Myself personally, I bought that new centrifuge. I have a different centrifuge, but I just bought that constant run centrifuge, which should be here probably in June sometime because they're on back order. But they're supposed to have them ready May 15th, I think it was. But anyways, what I wanted to talk about is there is a cost, and the cost is extra wear on injection system. So whether it be your lift pump, fuel filters, injection pump, injectors, and probably a little bit of wet engine wear, probably. Not a lot on the engine wear side of things as long as you're running it properly, but there is a cost for running it. So what I wanted to talk about was, just so you guys are aware, if you're gonna start doing this, there is risk involved. Now, I have done it a lot of kilometers, miles, whatever you want to say. And I've never had an issue with injection pumps. Now, I've always replaced the lift pumps with better lift pumps. I've always put better filters on the truck. And I've always pulled the injectors out every 30, 40,000 kilometers and tore them apart, cleaned them, either put new nozzles on or whatever. Now, the more I refined it and the better I got at it and the better the mixtures were, I found that I didn't have to do that anymore and running water meth. But I still like to pull them out once in a while and just check, make sure everything's good, because I do that. I have the equipment to do it, so it's not a huge deal. Now, but I do want it to stress that VE, the best engine to do this on is an inline injection system. Don't care what brand it is, whatever. Inline injection system, so like a P pump, an A pump, a Sigma pump. Sigma pump, not so much there, but that style of pump. Whether it be on a tractor, on a bulldozer, on a pickup truck, on a road tractor, on a bus, whatever. The reason for that is because they are not lubricated by the fuel. The fuel is compressed, shoved into the injector. Now with VEs, still good for it, but you have to remember any crap that you don't get out of it has to run through the pump and is compressed by the pump. Basically, has to go through the pump, that cools the pump, lubricates the pump. So any crap you have in there, you are stressing the pump to make it burn that. Not burn it, but to process it. Let's say process, the right word. Now the cleaner you get it, the better off you are, you won't have issues. But just so you're forewarned, I want to forewarn you guys, if you're doing this, there is risk, there is cost in doing this. So this is the breakdown, how I figured it out a long time ago, roughly. Price of fuel now is probably even higher than that. I went by our price roughly around here. It was even higher than that. I filled my truck up when I went and got the International, and it cost me 167 Canadian dollars to fill my truck. So that gives you an idea. So I did 150, so it would probably be roughly the same. I figured down in the States, roughly gonna be the same, up in Canada, roughly in that same realm, right? So to give you this rundown, but like I said, I wanted to talk about that. Something to do, you also wanna make sure is that you change your fuel filters. Change your fuel filters. I personally like to have this set up in 2 tanks so that you can switch over to diesel fuel, run it on diesel fuel sometimes to help clean the system, make sure the system doesn't get coked up real bad. Running water meth, having the double system, one, it's easier to start on, and if you're in town or whatever and you don't want it to smoke, because it will smoke more running this concoction. With the veg, it's not as bad because it just smells like vegetable oil or whatever might be cooking. So it's not as bad. But I personally still like to be able to switch from diesel fuel over to our alternative fuel, myself personally. I change my fuel filters every time I change my oil. If you run extended oil changes, I personally would change them more often, just depending on how long you're going, because it sucks to be stuck on the side of the road because you didn't have a fuel filter. Also, I would recommend having an extra fuel filter for the alternative fuel setup, as well as whatever you're running on the truck tank side of things. Myself personally, carry an extra couple fuel filters, well worth it if you're stuck on the side of the road to have a fuel filter. Now, if you're doing long drives, you know, the lift pump, if you're running a VE truck, I recommend to go over to a piston style pump because the diaphragm pumps tend not to like to move the heavier weight fuel as easy. So I like the piston style pump. We will get into that in another video. I will talk about that, what springs to use, blah, 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 all that stuff. And I will tell you where you can get the springs from. I will have some in stock. So you guys are in Canada, they're a little harder to find in Canada. I will have some in stock if you need some. You know, I'm not gonna really make any money off it, but I'll, you know, for whatever they are a little tiny, you know, a couple bucks extra, and I'll throw them in an envelope and we'll ship them to you. So anyways, enough of that. Talking about what it costs to run the truck on, let's say black diesel or a veg blend. Now this does not cover in the setup cost, because it will have a setup cost to start with. Myself personally, won't put it just into the tank and run it, myself personally. I do not recommend doing that. You want to do that, that's more than fine. I just don't recommend doing that. So basically how I figure it, the way that we're blending, you know, if you change your blend a little bit, whatever, you can get cheaper diesel fuel, you can get used gas or old diesel fuel, kerosene, Jet A, whatever. If you can get it cheaper, this will make that number way lower. You know, like I got that 200 liters of used gas, so I can do, let's say we put 20% in, even if they said put 25% in because it's used garbage. If you just say 25% in, that means that I can make 4 tankfuls of fuel for nothing. The time it took me after work to go pick it up. Basically, my time, which is worth something, don't get me wrong, but much cheaper than, you figure 4 tanks would be $600. So I think that that's worth my time. So this is what I had figured out. So kind of figuring out what it's going to cost you for your oil, plus your fuel filters, plus your actual straining filters and all that, maybe a little bit of power. Shouldn't probably cost this much, but that's just a general idea. It's a general figure, right? So a tank, 25 gallons, 100 liters-ish, right? Ish, because that's not exactly how it goes over, because it's, anyways, doesn't matter. So for that same volume of fuel, you're roughly, I would say, there again, ish, $150 for a tank of fuel for 25 gallons. Maybe your truck holds less, holds more, whatever. We're just going off 25 gallons. But that's saving you 40 bucks, right? Saving you $110 per tank of fuel. So, you know, if you do all your processing and all that stuff and spend a day doing it, you know, whatever you figure you make in a day, let's say you make 300 bucks a day. You only have to make, even if you took a day off work and you made $300 a day, you went and picked it up, processed everything, you only got to process 3 tanks of fuel to make the same amount. You know what I'm saying? So if you brought home, let's say, 250 gallons or 1,000 liters, 10 tankfuls, and you actually spent a whole day doing it, you took a day off of work, you would be still getting 7 tankfuls of fuel for free. Still a good deal, I think, because that's considerable. That's if you have the room to do that. You know, if you have a garage or whatever, and or you can put it outside, whatever you do, however you do it, you know, that's your deal. Pretty good deal, I personally think. There again, if you don't want to run it, you don't want to take the risk, whatever. So what I figured was on 100,000 miles, 160,000 kilometers, you're going to burn about, I think it was like 21,000 liters of fuel-ish. 21,000 liters, or 22,000, maybe it was, doing the math on the top of my head. About 22,000 liters for us guys that use liters. I use gallons. I use metric and standard. I use a lot of standard, so. But you're 5,882 gallons of fuel. So if you divide that by 25 gallons per tank, that's 235 tankfuls. right? So if you were buying diesel fuel at 150 bucks per tank, right? You're going to be $35,250 for those 235 tanks, right? Tanks, right? That's what it worked out to in diesel fuel. Now, if you're doing this at 40 bucks per tank full, you're 9,400. I think you could cut this considerably. I think you should be able to cut that to probably $10 to $20 per tank full if you have this, if you're doing the setup right and you have, you know, you can get some connections and get good product. Now, that being said, if you're running straight veg with nothing, you still need to clean it, so there's some process involved, but likely you're going to be able to get it for almost nothing. Probably, you know, like, you know, box of donuts, like I said before, box of donuts, box of coffee for the guys where you're getting it, guys, girls, wherever. You probably can cut this down, but I'm just, you know, just for argument's sake, right? Let's say it's costing you 40 bucks a tank full. So the difference between those two, because my brain is not functioning that well because it is later at night. That worked really not good. Let's try that. Yeah, so you're saving 25,000. You're saving 25,000. You're saving. So if we come this up to here, you're saving $25,850 in fuel, and that's at 40 bucks a tank full. So, you know, if you can cut that down to 20, you know, you're going to be like another, let's say, 4,000 bucks on top of that versus that. So the reason that I did this all out, savings, because I should put that savings. Wow, you guys won't be able to read that at all. There we go. So $25,000 worth of savings, right? And this is how I get into this and talk about it, because like I said, there is a downside. You will have issues. Now, let's say you have to spend, let's say you go on the higher end of things and you buy the centrifuge that I bought, which was $1,800 US. Let's say $2,000, just for easy numbers, $2,000, and you spend another 500 bucks on tanks and filter housings and a pump and blah, 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 all that stuff, which you should be able to do pretty easy. And you set that up with a tote, with two totes, let's say, relatively extravagant setup here, a barrel and a pump. Let's say you're $3,000 into your setup. Let's say 3,000 bucks. And that's doing it pretty nice, right? So you spent $3,000. So now this $2,500 or $25,000, now you're only, let's say well, let me get rid of some of this, just for easy, so we can see easy. You guys have already seen this part. So let's say you set your setup, set up, costs $3,000. We're talking US dollars, but let's say $3,000 for your setup. And let's say you want to set something up in your truck, but you're not heating it. Even if you're heating it, you still do it relatively cheap. But let's say you're not heating it, but you have an extra tank and the plumbing and all that stuff. And even if you paid somebody to do it, I would say you should be able to do that for another $1,000 bucks. I think. Set up truck. You know, most of you guys that are watching are relatively inclined, so I would imagine you could set it up for $1,000 bucks. Now this is not bottom of the rung. You could do it way cheaper than this. But this is how I would recommend having a good centrifuge, right? So, because the centrifuge is kind of you don't have to let it settle. You want to let it settle a little bit, but you don't have to let it settle for a long time. You can make it so that you're not using a tote, you can use barrels. So, you know, you can kind of compensate a little bit kind of idea, right? You don't have to have as much on hand. I personally like it in bigger volumes because then you don't have to do it as often. But, so now you're into 4,000 bucks, right? This is on that, you do this, you're done. You don't have to do it again, right? And that's 100,000 miles. So don't get me wrong, this is not something that's going to pay off tomorrow. You have to invest some dough. But you're still saving $21,580. Can't talk apparently. $21,850 in savings still. You're still saving that. Even though you did that, I realize there's some upfront cost. Now the next thing that I recommend for guys to do is whatever you have on your truck. I personally run water meth, but you don't have to. But you do need to pull the injectors out more often. If you don't, that's what I think. Have to? No. But I personally would. But if you're on water meth, you don't have to. It keeps everything cleaner, blah, blah, blah. There's a little bit of cost involved in that. Now you can run basically straight water in the summertime as long as it's not cold out. And in the wintertime, you can run windshield washer fluid or mix it with water, with methanol, whatever. But not including that. So if you wanted to do that, probably cost you $500 for the kit, let's say, to buy an actual kit. You can piece one together way cheaper. It doesn't need to be a super high volume, whizzy thing. It just needs to help you clean the system. So you're still saving, let's say $22,000. That's at $40 a tank. So if you can make it cheaper, you're saving more. Now, let's say the injection system on your truck needs to be changed every 100,000 miles. Let's just say, or even say, let's say you put 2 sets of injectors in it and you do an injection pump and you do 2 lift pumps. So let's say an injection pump is, let's go on the high end, let's say for a P pump. We're gonna go to rebuild your P pump, or even if you just buy one that's already rebuilt. Let's say you're $2,000 for a P pump. I'm not saying you're gonna have to change it, and if you have problems with the P pump, you could have problems at any time. Let's say you're gonna be $2,000 for a P pump. You're gonna be, let's say, $1,000 in injectors, so you're $3,000, and you're a couple $100 in lift pumps, right? So let's say you're $3,500 in the injection system, right? Injection system, let's say you're $3,500 every 100,000 miles, right? If you go longer, not great, but bank for this. So now how I look at it is, if you need $3,500 every 100,000 miles, if the system works perfect, there's nothing wrong with it right now, you go 100,000 miles, you could go 300,000 miles maybe, I don't know. But you potentially could go a long time and not have problems. But if you start banking, if you take $25 per tank right from the get-go, so let's say it costing you $65. You take that $25 away, put that $25 away, right? You put that $25 away into whatever. I personally would invest it because I invest money. I personally would invest it because then it'll grow money. Different topic. We won't get into that. But let's say you put that $25, even if you just put it into a high investment savings account that makes you 2%. Let's say, for instance, because that point, the interest doesn't matter. But I personally would put somewhere else. But if you did that, if you did 25 per tank, so if you do $25 per tank times 235, that'll be $5,875. So basically, so you put that $5,800, or sorry, the camera died on me, so I kind of lost my spot here. So if you take that you're talking that $5,875, $25 per tank, over the course of that 100,000 kilometers or 100,000 miles, however many it is, or if you ramp it up, let's say you start doing cheaper, but you keep saving that money, you know, you get, let's say you get $5,800 saved up. Then if something happens to your injection system, it's not such a big deal. All you do is go to your local injection system or your local shop, or you do it yourself, whatever it may be, or you call me and say, hey, I need a set of injectors. You call me and, hey, I need a pump, which I would just refer you to somebody else, but for the pump anyway, which would be Seth Farrell. Or you could do if you're not doing anything special with there's lots of injection system places, loads. If you're just doing a stock pump, there's all kinds of different places you can do exchange pumps, all kinds of stuff. But that being said, if you're doing this, if you start saving that $25 a tank, you will have this after that 100,000 miles. But also take into consideration, let's say you start having problems at 50,000 miles. You will have that much money, or close, not quite half, but you'll have a bunch of that money. It's just the injection pump, you can do the injection pump. Needs a set of injectors, there's the money. So that's personally how I do it. because that way you're never stuck, right? I know lots of people, you want to do this to save money. Yeah, you can save money, but you also need to take in consideration if something happens. I don't think the engine side of things, you're probably going to have problems with the engine. I never did. Could, but I never did. If you're saving this money, then if you do have a problem, then you're not in a bad situation. But you're still, even if you say, okay, well, I'm going to take the price of all of this off, right? So this is what you're saving at $40 a tank. If it's costing you 40 bucks a tank to do that, at the 150 a tank, right? Versus 150 a tank. If you figure that, so if you take, let's say you take away your $4,000 for your truck setup and your setup, let's even say $4,500, because I would want a water mass setup on it. So let's say you're going to take off $4,500 for that. That leaves you $21,350, right? So basically this, but let's take that off there. We don't need that anymore. And then you're going to take off this $5,875. $5,875. Whoops, that ain't working. $25,300. Take away $5,875. That's still going to save you. You'll still be saving doing all this. If all the shit hit the fan and you had to do an injection pump, 2 sets of injectors, an extra lift pump, two lift pumps, and that's in that 100,000 miles, you would still save if the price stays the same, which I think is probably going to get worse. That's what it's going to cost you. That's what you're going to save. You're going to save that much. You're going to save like $15,000 to $16,000. I think it's worth it to save 15 grand. Myself personally, I put all of the money away, so this $15,000, I actually physically save it, put it away. I realize not everybody's in the same position that I am, but that's what I would recommend doing. But if you do set it up this way and you save the money, if you have a problem, you don't have a problem. You have a problem, but you don't have a financial problem. But you're still saving this much money, right? And then, like I said, the lower you can get it, if you can get used gas and used diesel fuel and stuff like that and mix in with it, or use Jet A out of, old helicopters and jet airplanes and stuff. If you know somebody, lots of people know somebody that knows somebody, you can use furnace oil, you can use colored diesel fuel, anything to cut that cost down. Not that I recommend to use anything that doesn't have road tax paid on it, but whatever. I just wouldn't recommend to do that because obviously for the obvious reasons. But that being said, take a look at this, watch the video a couple times if you have to. If you have questions, hit me down below and let me know what you think. But I just want you guys to be aware to make sure that if you have problems, you're not stuck out in the winter, or stuck out in the cold, stuck out in the winter, stuck out in the cold because you were doing this. Now, don't get me wrong, you could have problems 20,000 miles in. It's possible. But if you start saving it, you're still going to have a little bit of money, right? And personally, if you're running around in a diesel truck and you don't have a few bucks like to be available, probably not good because they are expensive to fix. And running on diesel fuel, you can have a problem. You get a slug of water and kill a set of injectors. So anyways, like, subscribe, hit me down in the comments, and remember, it's not rocket science.